It was stunning news this week. Elements of the Iranian government planned to assassinate the Saudi ambassador here in Washington. Joining us now to discuss the alleged plot and how the U.S. should respond is the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Dianne Feinstein. And Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you, Chris.
You were just saying, just before we went on the air, people still don't believe this. Can persuade them that this was real, and answer two questions from me. How high up in the Iranian government did this go, and what does it tell you about what's going on in Tehran right now?
Well, I was first briefed in the beginning of September. It sounded doubtful because of the cast of characters and because of the fact that the operative entity was the Quds Force, Department 400, part of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the elite unit that really is sent out by Iran into various areas that finances terrorism, etc. And I didn't believe it either. But as it turned out, it's very real. And what it represented was a rather unique effort between our Drug Enforcement Administration, FBI, CIA, a kind of coming together of agencies to collect intelligence, both human and signals intelligence.
What do you think is the single most compelling piece of evidence that this is real?
Let me just finish. The case is dead bang, I think. I think some of the signals intelligence, candidly, is the most compelling. And secondly, Batsiar himself.
This is the Iranian used car salesman.
That's right. In answers to his questions, essentially fessed up, essentially admitted it was real, and money was transferred. And so it's real, all right.
And how high up in the government does it go, and what does it tell you about what's going on in that government?
The four Quds Force officials sanctioned by the Treasury Department include Qassem Soleimani, who is head of the Quds Force. He is known as a very careful manager. He is reported to be very close to the Supreme Leader. There's no evidence that it reached the Supreme Leader. There certainly
Would you just say
is
the
evidence
Supreme Leader is Ayatollah
Soleimani knew, and the head knew. Now, this is an unusual thing. Iran reaches out around Iran, but to cross to the other side of the world and try an attack in this country is an escalation, and that's what concerns us, and I think that's what concerns the Saudis as well.
You say an escalation. You also say that we should be on alert for other plots in other countries. What do you know about that?
Well, there's no question that the Quds Force has been responsible for other operations, going back to 1993 in Buenos Aires with the Argentinian-Israeli Mutual Association and that bomb.
But you think
and 4 days ago in Iraq, they carried out an operation or financed an operation against our people in Iraq.
So do you think there are other ongoing plots in other countries?
What I said was, I think there well could be. I don't think this is just an isolated thing that suddenly came up when they have never done these kinds of things before. They have done these kinds of things before, and this is certainly a continuum, but an extension and an escalation.
So far, all President Obama is talking about is tougher sanctions, and we went back and looked at the history of that, put it up. Since 1979, the U.S. has issued 19 executive orders and passed 7 laws sanctioning Iran. Since 2006, the UN has passed 5 sets of sanctions. Meanwhile, despite all of that, Iran continues to pursue a nuclear program. It continues to be, as we see here, a state sponsor of terrorism. Do you believe that sanctions can work to change Iran's behavior?
I don't think the sanctions have been as complete as they should be. I wish they had sanctioned the Central Bank of Iran, and that would affect oil, and maybe that's why they didn't do it. But that makes a big difference.
Is that what you would like to see now?
Yes.
And the argument is, well, we could sanction the bank, and the key there is obviously not, we don't do business with the central bank, but that would mean we would blacklist any foreign country or company that does business with the central bank.
Correct.
Can that work without China and Russia being on board?
Well, that's another subject, and this is why the State Department sent out teams to share evidence, to share intelligence to the extent they could with all our allies, and in particular with the Security Council of the United Nations. We actually were briefed by one of the men that participated in that Security Council briefing. There should be no doubt. The evidence is very strong. The FBI believes the case is both strong and good and will result in a conviction.
But you would support sanctioning, blacklisting Iran's central bank and any company around the world that does business with it?
Absolutely, and for other reasons too. I mean, this is just one part. Iran is escalating, I believe, its nuclear development. Iran is increasingly hostile. They have not ceased supporting Hezbollah or Hamas or participating in the, bringing of missiles and rockets into Lebanon through Damascus. It's a very dangerous situation, and my hope is that there can be some kind of discussion that can be convincing for the Iranians to change course. Absent that, at one time or another, if you project out a number of years, we're on a collision course. And if we want to avoid it, we have to take action to avoid it.
Well, I want to talk to you about that. Retired General Jack Keane, who was one of the architects of our counterinsurgency strategy in Iraq and Afghanistan, says the U.S. should take military action. Here he is.
I would start with targeting the Quds Force, who has been using these proxies to conduct actions against us. I would conduct covert actions against them and espionage. That means kill them and take their bases away from them.
Why not go after the Quds Force?
Well, that's perhaps more difficult than it's said to be. I think this is a large operation. It's in the thousands. It's an elite branch. How you go after them, how do you do it? I've never seen a plan to do it. It probably would escalate into a war, and the question is, do we want to go to war with Iran at this time? My judgment is no. We have our hands full with Iraq, with Afghanistan, with the deteriorating relationship with Pakistan. I mean, I think this is not, our country should not be looking to go to war. I think we should be looking to stop bad behavior short of war.
I've got a couple of minutes left. I want to ask you about two other hot spots.
Sure.
Friday afternoon, President Obama announced he's sending 100 U.S. Special Forces as trainers, as advisors into Central Africa to act, as I say, as trainers against the Lord's Resistance Army, several hundred brutal guerrillas there who have created tremendous damage over the last couple of decades. Do you support, you say we got our hands full, do you support deploying more U.S. troops into another foreign conflict?
Well, let me first of all say what it is. We passed a resolution during the Bush administration that urged that we respond to this brutality, and President Bush authorized advisors to go over. They were unarmed. The difference here is that these are still advisors, the 100, but they are armed and they are cleared to act in self-defense. What is the Lord's Resistance Army? It is a brutal militia, and it's in Uganda, it's in the Central African Republic, it's in the Congo, and it moves through and it rapes and it pillages and it cuts people apart.
We're running out of time. Why send troops there, but we won't send troops to try to end the slaughter in Syria?
Well, that's a good question. But I think I think there are two entirely different circumstances. One is a reaction as part of the Arab Spring. The other has been an ongoing move to essentially annihilate people, essentially really kill large numbers of people. And I think this is a small group. It's 100 people. They give military advice to the regional army that's in the area. We'll see what happens.
Finally, the Obama administration is now scaling back its plans for how many troops we're going to keep in Iraq at the end of 2011. Fewer than 1,000, perhaps a few hundred, because we can't work out a deal with the Iraqi government. Your reaction? Well,
that's right. The status of forces agreement expires the end of this year. We need to have a new status of forces agreement, or we're there essentially against the will of the government. And I think we will not continue against the will of the government.
But are you troubled at the idea that we would basically be all out of that?
Yeah, I'm troubled because of, you know, I look at Korea, the length of time it took to provide stability there, or Japan, the length of time it took to provide stability there. And I think people, you know, are so anxious for our men and women to come home, and I understand that. It is also important that the job is completed in a way that provides the greatest chances for stability for the country. And I think that is a key goal for Afghanistan as well as Iraq. So I am hopeful that they will be able to quickly negotiate a status of forces agreement. Absent that, yes, we'll have to bring our people home.
Senator Feinstein, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for talking with us today, and we'll stay on top of all these stories.
Thank you, Chris, and happy birthday.
Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Although I've got to say, at my age, it's not a cause of celebration.
Yeah, I understand.